On a magical island built upon the body of a colossal, long-dormant god, a lonely but optimistic, light-themed outcast struggles to fit in the island's elementally-themed category system and forms bonds with other oddballs on an adventure of self-discovery that leads them to uncover the true nature of their island god and undo the plans of a shape-shifting eldritch abomination that has been posing as the society's authoritarian ruler. This is the BIONICLE House. Hello, gathered friends, I'm Furor Nuva, and welcome to BIONICLE Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO BIONICLE. And today, on the 6th anniversary of its premiere, I wanted to talk about the Owl House and the interesting number of parallels it has to BIONICLE. They're definitely not the same, but I do love it when the stories I enjoy share similarities, because it's a good opportunity to explore how the same tropes can be used in different ways. So, let's dive right into it. For those unfamiliar, The Owl House was an animated series that aired on Disney and follows the story of Luz, a weird and kind-hearted girl who has trouble fitting in and who stumbles upon a portal to the Boiling Isles, a fantastical realm filled with witches, demons, and magic. Starting off as an episodic adventure, it slowly becomes a high-stakes saga with incredibly compelling characters, and the vibes hit that perfect blend of creepy and hilarious. And for any Owl House fans who clicked on this without knowing much about BIONICLE, BIONICLE was a LEGO action figure line with a story told primarily through books, as well as comics, movies, and web animations. It was the story of the Toa, a team of biomechanical heroes with elemental powers, trying to save their people and uncover the mysteries of their strange world. BIONICLE is an epic with massive world building and mystery, tons of lovable characters, and an unmatched storytelling aesthetic that blurs the line between sci-fi and fantasy like no other. And just as a heads up, this analysis is going to contain very massive spoilers for both series. Though both of these stories are well written enough that knowing information ahead of time can actually enhance the experience instead of ruining it. Okay, so right out of the gate, I think everyone who's seen both series can guess the biggest parallel between them. That both of their primary settings are islands built upon the bodies of enormous, long-dormant beings who are worshipped as gods by those that live upon them. For the Owl House, it's the Titan, the colossal skeletal remains that formed the Boiling Isles. Long ago, the Titan was a member of an incredibly powerful species of magical beings that grew to enormous sizes in the demon realm. When it died, its bodies formed into a large set of islands, and its inherent magic led to the creatures that evolved to live on it gaining natural magical abilities. As the source of all magic on the island, the witches came to honor the Titan as a deity. Though decomposing, the Titan was not fully dead, its heart still beat, and later in the series it is revealed that his spirit was still around, laying dormant in a world between dimensions, but still able to subtly influence events. And in BIONICLE, the world they live in is the enormous body of a robotic being known as Matanui that had crashed into the ocean over 1,000 years before the beginning of the story, with an island forming over his face, the only part of the robot still above water. The characters were essentially the maintenance drones that kept the giant robot's body functioning like its cells, and had evacuated to the island when the robot crashed. Long ago, they had accidentally gained sapience and developed a whole world of cultures on the inside of the robot body, which they never knew was a body. As far as they knew, it was just the universe they lived in. They grew to worship Matanui as the great spirit that watched over and protected their universe. Now, the trope of a world or setting being the body of an enormous mythical being that is either dead or dormant is not unique to either of these stories. In fact, it's a very old mythological trope common to many ancient religions. Greek mythology depicted the earth as the primordial goddess Gaia. Norse myth had the world being created by the body parts of the slain giant Ymir. And in Maori mythology, the island of Te Aka Maui, the northern island of Ariatoa, was a giant fish hauled up from the sea by the hero Maui, hence its name meaning the fish of Maui. And in more modern stories, we have Primus from Transformers being their home planet of Cybertron. So we can't say that either one was necessarily inspired by the other, but we can compare and contrast the ways they use this common trope. In BIONICLE, the fact that the world they lived on was a body was a major part of the mystery of the series. It wasn't something the characters or the audience knew, but something they had discovered near the end. As a result, the references to body parts had to be much more subtle and abstract, while in hindsight, it's clear how much of the world was built around it secretly being a body. These aspects were made hidden. By contrast, the whole of the Boiling Isles is covered in bones and body parts, and there's a massive skull on the horizon, showing clearly it's a corpse in every aspect of its aesthetic and world building. The characters know and accept that they're all living on a giant's remains. One major difference in how the world as a body trope is played in that, in Bionicle, keeping Motunui alive and healthy is a major part of the story, and even if the characters didn't know it, they were all playing roles in keeping his body functioning. They knew their labors somehow kept the Great Spirit healthy, and in turn allowed their world to prosper. Meanwhile, in the Owl House, the Titan is considered dead by most of the inhabitants, and while they live off of his body, they aren't making an effort to preserve it. That said, one way the Owl House and Bionicle are similar is that in both series, the protagonists are somewhat guided by the spirit of the island's dormant body. In Bionicle, Motunui personally intervened by creating false prophecies in the stars as part of a ploy to ensure his chosen heroes got their powers. And in the Owl House, it is suggested that the Titan was intentionally revealing the secrets of its glyph magic to the protagonist Luz, while it had done its best to hinder the antagonist Emperor Belos from learning the same. Another interesting parallel between Motunui and the Titan is the fact that when we finally meet these deified beings near the end of each of their series, we find out that, personality-wise, they're both just some guy. They both subvert our expectations by being surprisingly humble and grounded for an entity that had been hyped up as a god for the entire series up until that point. They don't think of themselves as gods. That's just what people who didn't fully understand them have projected onto them. Both are fallible and know they are. They're not shy about the fact that they make mistakes, like the Titan targeting the wrong collector, and Motunui not paying attention to his people and the evil that was growing inside him. And I find this interesting because of the different ways that the God is just a guy trope is used to support each of their central messages, both of which contain a deconstruction of religion. In the Owl House, the reverence given to the Titan was used as a source of legitimacy for Emperor Belos, who claimed to be able to speak to the Titan. Belos issued his degrees on controlling magic as coming from the Titan, and that the Titan was displeased when they used magic outside of Belos' strict system. The reveal that the Titan was a mostly easygoing dad just looking out for his kid, and not the judgmental god Belos claimed he was, serves as the final confirmation that Belos was just a liar and manipulator. He abused the witch's spirituality for his own ends, much like how in the real world there are many that use faith as a means to gain earthly power and control, in contradiction to what their religion usually teaches. And in Bionicle, the great spirit of the universe, being revealed to be a giant robot, who is further revealed to be a surprisingly humble and down-to-earth guy, connects to the theme of perspective in Bionicle. The mystical beliefs of the Matoran are revealed to be rooted in science they don't fully understand, mainly because they were never told. They were never meant to be fully alive and conscious, just parts of the machine. They developed sapience, and with that, a sense of culture, and created belief systems about their world. Belief systems that were informed by the fact that they didn't fully understand everything that was happening. To them, the consciousness of the robot was a great spirit who gave order to their world. From their point of view, the robot's reboot protocol, in case it went offline, was a cosmically ordained destiny for their heroes to reawaken God. And despite them not having the full truth, their beliefs revealed a deeper truth about their emergent humanity. These things were sacred to them because they mattered to them. And the fact that he knows how much he mattered to them is a major motivation for Motunui as he tries to save them later in the series, when he's reduced to a normal, mortal body. And in both series, the main villain's final plan involved them possessing the body of the sleeping island god in order to obtain ultimate power, though we'll go over that more in a little bit. And in the end, both the Titan and Motunui end up sacrificing what is left of their life force to bring back down the villain that stole their body from them. So, The giant body forming an island trope is the big obvious parallel. There's actually a few more interesting ones I'd like to explore as well. Particularly the parallels between the Owl House's protagonist, Luz, and the protagonist of the first few arcs of Bionicle, Takua. Both of them are outcasts who struggle to fit in and act normal within the relatively rigid category systems of their setting. In the Owl House, the Witches of the Boiling Isles are required by the Emperor to join one of 9 covens, each with their own type of magic. By joining a coven, the witches will only be able to use that type of magic, with all their other magic being sealed away. As a human studying to learn magic, Luz couldn't decide what field of magic to study and ended up wanting to study all the different types, which was forbidden. And even in the human realm, Luz was ostracized for being a weirdo whose imagination doesn't fit within the normal, rigid norms of her school system. But her genuine curiosity and compassion led to her gaining new friends and a new family among other outcasts on the Isles. Eventually, she was even permitted to study all the different tracks of magic in the magical school. She even learned how to cast her own magic in her own unique way, since as a human, she lacked natural magical abilities. Throughout the story, she played a pivotal role in the rebellion against the Emperor, largely by bringing people together, people who were ostracized from different sects of the island. Meanwhile, in Bionicle, the Matoran were categorized into 6 different tribes based on element, and each element has their own role and cultural values. Takua was a member of the Fire Village, but was never fully comfortable staying just there, and was driven to wander the island and explore all the elemental villages. This made him a bit of an outcast, particularly in the Fire Village, where they actually banished him for wandering off and being irresponsible. However, his bravery and curiosity led him to saving many of the other villages. His heroism and his weird knack for being present at historically significant events involving the Toa led him to being welcomed back with the job of chronicler, where he was to travel the island recording and spreading stories of the Toa's adventures. The connections he formed eventually led him to being called upon by the village elders to lead the Chronicler's Company, an alliance of villagers to defend the Toa's backs while they confronted Makuta, and prevent Makuta's forces from attacking them from behind. For this alliance, he ended up choosing a small group of oddballs like himself, who defended the temple entrance valiantly. He even brought the whole island together, with the rest of the villagers coming together to rescue the Chronicler's Company when they became overwhelmed by Makuta. For both Luz and Takua, their journeys were of lovable oddballs who didn't quite fit into the rigid systems. But through their compassion and curiosity, they build friendships and bring people together who also don't fit in. Now, a little bit later in the series, Takua discovered that part of the reason he never fully fit in with any of the 6 elemental tribes was because he actually belonged to a 7th element, light. Now, Luz also has major motifs surrounding light. Her name means light in Spanish, and the first glyph spell she learns, and the one most associated with her, is the light spell. Now, both Luz and Takua's struggles with fitting into rigid categories have led many of their fans interpreting and analyzing their character arcs through the lenses of both neurodivergence and queerness. These aspects are more explicitly explored with Luz, who we know was purposely written to be both neurodivergent and queer. The creator of the show, Dana Terrace, once posted that while she didn't have a specific diagnosis in mind during the early concepts of Luz's character, she knew that Luz was going to be a kid who struggled with the fact that she learned and processed information differently from the majority of her classmates. Despite being smart and creative, Luz struggled in school, and at the beginning of the series was being sent off to a summer camp specifically to get her to think inside the box. But on the Boiling Isles, with her witch mentor Ida, who herself was a rebel outcast, she's in an environment where her uncommon way of looking at things is embraced, and so Luz thrives there. And with Takua, I think it's pretty clear he was written as an ADHD and neurodivergent, even if it wasn't specifically those terms used. His story is clearly made to resonate with the kids whose mind likes to wander, who can't seem to sit in one place, and who feel like they don't quite fit in. When we find him at the beginning of the story, he had long been banished from his home village of Takoro because the people there got fed up with his wandering. Takua was eventually made chronicler and tasked with traveling the island recording significant events, collecting and telling stories as he went. And he did very well in this job that finally let him use his mind the way he thinks, rather than try to force him into being something he's not. Now, from the queer angle, Luz is bisexual and has a girlfriend by the end of the series. And a common experience among bisexual people is the sentiment that their attraction doesn't fit into the rigid categories of totally gay or totally straight, and up until recently wasn't treated as a valid option by mainstream society, even by those who accepted gayness. And while Luz's gender identity isn't fully explored, Luz does experiment with gender presentation outside the binary, wearing a combination of tuxedo and tutu for Grom Night. Luz's bisexuality is openly accepted in the series, but it's not a stretch to say that the Coven's systems of demanding rigid conformity, where mixing magic is forbidden, may have also been an allegory for the type of discrimination queer people face for not fitting within cishet norms. And while Takua's journey almost certainly wasn't written with exploration of gender identity in mind, Bionicle's frankly absurd lore regarding gender, combined with Takua's struggles with identity, have led many queer Bionicle fans to look back at it as an accidental but deeply moving trans allegory. So, among the Matoran, who are completely asexual and have no physiological differences between sexes, gender is actually determined by element, with most elemental tribes being male and some being female, with the elements having more differences between them than the genders do. This has led many Bionicle fans to choose to interpret each element as its own gender. And thus, Takua's struggles with fitting in with the elemental tribes can be seen as a parallel to struggles with gender identity. And the reveal that he's actually a member of an element he didn't even know existed, as well as his body physically transforming to fit that element when he embraces his identity, resonated deeply with non-binary and transgender Bionicle fans. This is only heightened by the fact that his native element, light, is the only element known to have both male and female members, and that Takua wore a blue mask associated with water, a female element, despite appearing to be a fire Matoran, who are supposed to be all male. So, we can see that they both had plenty of parallels to each other in regards to how their stories connect to both neurodivergent and queer people. While they both initially struggled in environments with rigid categories and expectations, they thrived when put in situations that embraced their differences, rather than tried to repress them. But despite their many similarities, Luz and Takua are also complete opposites in some aspects of the stories, namely their relationship to destiny. Early on in her story, Luz desperately wanted to have a grand prophesized destiny and to be a chosen one, largely because she lacked positive external validation. She wanted people to believe she was special and valued for some higher purpose. Her desire to receive that kind of validation was so intense, she was easily manipulated and scammed by someone who told her she had a destiny. And the episode ended up being a lesson in being wary of those who try to take advantage of that desire to feel special. Luz wanted to have destiny because she wanted to be accepted and understood and wanted. Even late in the series, she is desperate to prove her worth to those around her, and in doing so tries to take on more responsibility than she can sometimes handle because she wants to be more. This also manifested in deep feelings of guilt, since she blamed herself for Emperor Belos, among other things. In the end, a major resolution to her character arc was when she embraced the fact that through it all she really wanted was to be understood. On the other hand, Takua actively did not want a destiny, even though he had one. Takua was destined to become the Toa of Light, a prophesied savior for his people. Takua ran from responsibility out of fear of being a screw-up. His struggles with staying in one place led him to being banished by his people, and it's clear that left a long scar. As in Mask of Light, he refuses the call to adventure because he doesn't think he's capable of being responsible. Moreover, Takua isn't really motivated by a desire to prove himself. He wants to help people and to explore new places. He doesn't believe he can do or be anything more than that, so he actively runs from responsibilities he is capable of doing. Really, both Luz and Takua struggled with low self-esteem and how much worth they were to the people around them, but it motivated them in opposite directions, really showing how the same core trait can manifest differently in different characters. Now, the third major parallel between the Owl House and Bionicle comes from their main villains, who share a few interesting similarities. Both their master plans involved posing as the society's beloved authoritarian ruler. Dana Terrace in Bionicle kidnapped the ruler of the city and the giant robot's brain, and shapeshifted to impersonate him in the days leading up to Matanui's fall into endless sleep. Emperor Bellows was originally a human named Philip Wittebane, who took on a new identity to obscure the fact that he was a witch hunter who was plotting to kill all the witches on the Isles. Both used their absolute power and goodwill among the people in order to trick the populace into coming together at the center of the island for their planned apocalypse. Both apocalypses were brought about by an eclipse, or a double eclipse in the case of Bionicle, since what they believed to be suns were actually the eyes of Matanui closing. Both involved having the people willingly give up their lives, Makuta getting the Matoran to enter pods that put them into endless sleep and wipe their memories, and Bellows tricked the witches into participating in a ritual that would kill them all. Both Makuta and Bellows both have their main bodies destroyed after a major battle, and are thought dead, but persist as a green, goopy substance that lets them possess people. And thanks to that ability to possess people, their final schemes both involve them taking over the giant body that formed their islands. And, depending on the interpretation, both characters may have been at least somewhat motivated by a twisted and misplaced desire to protect their brother. Makuta is sometimes portrayed as claiming that him casting Matanui into endless sleep was to spare him pain, but in reality it was out of jealousy that the Matoran praised Matanui instead of him. Bellows first came to the Boiling Isles because he believed his brother Caleb had been taken by a witch, after they both spent their lives being caught up in the literal witch hunt hysteria of colonial America. He went on a journey to rescue Caleb, only to find his brother had actually fallen in love with a witch, not kidnapped by one. Enraged, Bellows murdered his brother, rationalizing that he was doing it for his own good, believing Caleb had been corrupted by the witches. But despite them claiming that their motivations were pure, really it was about their own selfishness and desire for power and praise. Makuta had a god complex, desiring praise above all else, and Bellows had a hero complex, wanting to return to the human realm as a witch hunter general for destroying the demon realm. In the end, the god complex and hero complex were basically the same thing for both of them, though with one interesting difference. Bellows was fundamentally a bigot, believing humans were superior to witches. Makuta Terrace, on the other hand, was not really a bigot because he genuinely saw all living beings, even his own kind, as beneath him, as again, he saw himself as a god. Now, one final interesting common beat between the Owl House and Bionicle was between Toa Ignika and the Collector. Both were absurdly powerful beings who had very naive and childlike dispositions, not really understanding the stakes of what was happening around them. Ignika was the Mask of Life, an incredibly powerful mask that literally controlled the power of life itself. The mask was secretly alive in its own way, and after having been an object that had been fought over for so many centuries, it decided to build a body for itself and truly experience life. Ignika behaved somewhat like a sheltered child because he never had to experience anything before. He didn't really understand the stakes of what was happening around him and approached every situation with curious naivety. And the Collector was a young member of a cosmically powerful species in the Owl House. He behaved like a child and treated everything like a game because he didn't really understand things like pain and death, since those things didn't happen to him. The worst things he could understand were loneliness and boredom, which is why he was obsessed with making friends and playing games, treating everything and everyone like a big game. But in the end, both of them were forced to grow up in surprisingly similar ways. They came to understand the seriousness of life and death, to the point where each of them came to sacrifice themselves for their friends, or at least came close to doing so. This understanding, and the inspiration to be genuinely selfless hero, came from each of them witnessing someone they were fond of sacrifice themselves for those they cared about. For Ignika, it was witnessing Matoro, the Mask of Life's destined bearer, sacrifice himself to use the mask to bring the Great Spirit Motunui back to life. This inspired him to become a Toa in the first place, and later inspired him to sacrifice the body he made in order to use his power to reawaken Motunui. And for the collector, it was watching Luz appear to be disintegrated by Belos' corrupting blast, the first time he ever really witnessed death. Later, the collector raced to save the people who were trapped in his collapsing castle, risking corruption and death himself because he finally saw the value in others' lives. Now, in general, the Owl House and Bionicle had quite a few tropes and story beats in common, from their settings taking place on an island made from a fallen giant, to their protagonists being lovable outcasts who bring people together, to their eldritch abomination dictator villains motivated by sibling jealousy. Oh yeah, and both Luz and Takua had a hot older lady mentor with a staff whose backstory involved being forcibly transformed into a violent feral half-beast swarm. Go figure. It's really fascinating to look at the different ways the different stories use the same broad themes to great effect. I really love both these series, which makes it kind of a shame that another thing they both had in common was that they were both cut short in their final arcs, forcing the writers to scramble to give them satisfying endings. But both are kept alive due to their fan bases that love them. If you want to read Bionicle, I highly recommend going to either Biological Chronicle or Wall of History, two fan-made yet completely canon-compliant compilations that take all the story material across the books, games, and web serials into easy-to-read formats. For the Owl House, well, that might be trickier. Screw Disney, honestly, but the creator of the series, Dana Terrace, does have a new indie animation series that premiered on Glitch on YouTube, The Knights of Guinevere, which looks really fascinating, so I recommend checking that out. But I hope I've shown how interestingly similar these two series can be. I'll see you all soon. Take care, my gathered friends, and bye!